Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we'll be discussing how the conflict in the Middle East, Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, has now been exported to the UK. Well, welcome to the programme, and I have two very special guests. They're also great friends of mine. I'm joined today by Len Grates, the Operations Director for the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, and together with Alistair Scott, the UK Director for Vision for Israel, or Joseph Storehouse, also do a number of programmes with you on Revelation TV. So it's great to see you both. Alistair, can you just give us an update on the Ministry of Vision for Israel run by Barrier and Batia Siegel, and how have Vision for Israel really responded to the crisis after October the 7th, and also the fact that Israel is on a war footing now, as it's been months now that Israel's been in military operations against Hamas in Gaza?
Yeah, it's you can imagine it's been a very, very busy time for the whole ministry in Israel, because the timing was incredibly bad or good, or however you want to call it. I mean, October the 7th, you were at our Feast of Tabernacles conference the week after down in Brighton, and we were kind of concerned, were Barry and Batia going to be able to even get into the country? And they managed to do it. They had to go all over via Spain and so on. But the response of our public has been amazing in this country, because the donations have been incredible, and we really want to thank you, all of you who are supporting the work, Vision for Israel in Israel, because immediately we opened up the warehouse, basically, and not only are we sort of teaching and proclaiming truth coming out of Israel. Barry's great at doing his reports. We use them here on Revelation TV quite regularly too. But the warehouse was opened so that anything that was needed, they could take it and use it for the soldiers, and anything that was going to be used, medical supplies and so on. And then more than that, the finances coming in has not only been able, we were running this project of putting in the bomb shelters all around the country, and increased it up north just before the crisis or the conflict started anyway, and making food available, clothing available to the people who are being displaced. I mean, people forget that in Israel there are something like 10,000 families being displaced from the north because of the conflict starting.
80,000.
Is it 80,000?
Over 80,000, yeah.
From there and down the south, obviously too, and so they need help. They've lost their jobs. They need places to stay, clothing, and all the rest. So we've been very involved at Vision for Israel for putting in supplies, helping with the Holocaust survivors. We still invite them down to the Millennium Center on a monthly basis at least, just to get their minds off what's going on in the country, entertain them, feed them, let them have fellowship together. So it's probably been the busiest, how many months is it now? It's 5 months, isn't it, since October, we've ever been. And it's great to be able to have been so much of help. And as I say, the donations that come in to us go straight across there and is being used for the help of the nation of Israel and the people of Israel. So it's
excellent. Well, thank you so much for the update, Alistair. And Len, it's always great to see you, and thank you for the partnership that we have with you with Jerusalem Dispatch, ICJ UK, which is really does focus on the incredible ministry that is the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem UK, which is aired on this channel every Monday, first Monday in the month, between 7 and 8 p.m. Len, do you want to just unpack, for example, how the ministry in the UK has raised over £100,000 to help Israel during this time of crisis?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. It's great to be back with you, and it's great to be with Alistair on the programme today. And very much like Vision for Israel, ICJ are addressing the same needs, because the needs are the same all over the country. Bomb shelters, helping the evacuees from the north, helping Holocaust survivors. They're all the things that need to be done regularly, but certainly have been ramped up since October the 7th. And we've been very humbled by the way the generosity of the Christian community here in the UK has sent money and donated money and prayed, committed to prayer. It's actually over £120,000 that we've now sent out which is only a little drop in a bucket when you consider the need. As you say, 80,000 evacuees from the north and around the Gaza Strip have had to move home.
And that's about 100,000, isn't it? Over
yeah,
100,000.
if you add them all up, that's a lot of people. That's a small town. And to provide housing, clothing, care for the kids. And one of the interesting things that we've been able to help with, a growing need, is the whole area of stress-related problems. That there's a huge number of stress-related from the soldiers who are coming back from leave, from the families who have soldiers in the army. It's just a huge need that we're just scraping at this huge mountain, really. So please, if you want to get involved more with Vision for Israel or ourselves or the other ministries that are working in Israel, please be generous at this time, because that's what we need. We need God's people to show the people of Israel that there are Christians who really do care for them.
Absolutely wonderful. And Alistair, share with us your thoughts on how the conflict in the Middle East, in particular Israel's war against the genocidal terrorist organisation that is Hamas in Gaza, over recent weeks looks like it's been exported here to the UK, and that we're facing the same hatred, the same threat, obviously not the same level of terror threat that Hamas posed to Israel prior to October the 7th. But certainly we're having our politicians in Parliament in fear, the police are in fear, the Jewish community in fear of this rise of Islamism.
I think it's one of it's amazing how quickly people forget what happened on October the 7th, and there's been this massive switch of allegiance, if you want to call it that, or support towards what's happening in Gaza. But then, in some ways it's not surprising, because if you are a watcher of terrestrial television in this country and you see news reports, they're so pro-Gaza and anti-Israel that it really is appealing to the flesh in so many ways, and people are reacting and responding because they think, the death rate of tens of thousands in Gaza is awful. But they forget the reason for this is it's a battle not against the Gazian people, it's not against Palestinians, if you want to call them that. I don't term anyone as being that. The Arab people. It's against a terrorist organization called Hamas down there in the south and Hezbollah up in the north. And as Benjamin Netanyahu continues to say, you cannot have a long-term peace unless you deal with the problem. And the problem is, of course, Hamas, the terrorist organization. But it's exported over here in such a way that even so many people are out on the streets. You've seen, I've been involved by accident in one or two of the pro-Palestinian supporters, rallies, or whatever you want to call them, when it's so aggressive, it's so hostile. And I've been very much involved in the pro-Israel vigils, as we call them, because they're so peaceful. Even the police say it is so peaceful when people are standing and praying, because it tends to be a prayer ministry for the Jewish side of things. But the problems we see with the way the whole thing is being portrayed, people don't even understand why they're there, but it's getting more and more hostile against the Jewish community. And, as Christians, we really need to know and let the Jewish people in our own communities know that we do stand for them. We will be there for them, because they do feel terribly threatened, not surprisingly, because anti-Semitism has risen up astronomically since October the 7th, or soon after October the 7th. Initially, everything was, wow, what's going on in Israel? But very soon it changed to what's going on in Gaza. And I think we need to tell the truth, not be silent, and challenge this wrong messages that are being portrayed about what's really going on down there in the south.
No, absolutely. And now let's have a look at this excellent press conference headed up by Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And this is thanks to the government press office in Israel known as the GPA.
I've been seeing you here year after year, but this year it's different. Each year you come here to express your solidarity with the state of Israel, the solidarity of the diaspora with the Jewish state. But this year, that solidarity is particularly important because it's an expression of unity between the Jewish people and the Jewish state, between so many of our friends around the world and the great trial that we are faced with today. We have faced an attack of savagery that is unparalleled since the Holocaust. We haven't seen such cruelty directed against the Jewish people since the Nazi genocide. We've seen children murdered in front of their parents, parents murdered in front of their children, women raped and beheaded after being raped. We've seen youngsters burned alive in death pits. We've seen mothers and babies kidnapped by these monsters. We've seen them rejoice over this savagery, something that even the Nazis refused to publicize. But they came in, these killers, with GoPro cameras to proclaim to the world, to their people, what kind of cruelty and what kind of inhumanity they were capable of. With fiendish glee, they showed this murderous, horrible action that puts us in front of a huge challenge. And our challenge and our goal can be summarized in 2 words: total victory. Total victory against these savages. It's not just our battle. It's not just our battle, it's the battle of civilization against barbarism. Because if Hamas gets away with this, if the axis of evil and terror that Iran dominates in this world, or seeks to dominate, the Middle East, it will expand everywhere. And so this is a battle that is important for Israel's future and our survival, but it's also critical for the future of civilization. So we set a goal, total victory. And that goal has 3 missions. 1, to destroy Hamas. 2nd, to free our hostages, all of our hostages. And 3rd, to ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel.
That was thanks to the GPO, the government press office in Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu, they were speaking at the Conference of Presidents of the major American Jewish organizations. I presumably think that that was in New York. Len, I mean, we're living in extraordinary times. And what's so interesting about the times we're living in is that Israel's not facing this battle alone. Against this demonic evil ideology, but this demonic evil ideology is here in the midst of us. It's here in Westminster. We've seen it in the streets of London, in the streets of Cardiff, and the streets of Manchester, and the streets of Glasgow, rallying behind the Palestinian cause as a pretext. But really, this is hatred against Israel and the Jewish people, is it not?
It is indeed, and it's not just an evil ideology; it's evil. You know, we've got to see beyond just the ideas, because that we can water things down by saying that. We're actually, as Christians, we wrestle against spiritual forces, and we're seeing this major spiritual force which has raised its head very often down the centuries. You know, I was speaking to a dear Jewish friend of mine recently, and they said, this reminds me of 1939 in what he's read of what happened in Nazi Germany. You know, the hatred that was being portrayed on the streets. And that's what we're seeing. We've never seen anything like this in my lifetime in the UK. I don't think ever in the UK have we seen such open anti-Semitism, hatred of Israel and hatred of the Jews. It's deeply disturbing to watch it. And I whenever I see these things on the TV, I think, well, why aren't the police doing something? What you know, they say one moment, we're going to deal with people that have masks on, and then they walk through the streets with masks, and the police smile at them and don't do anything. You know, it's a deeply disturbing time, and I'm sure for the Jewish community, they must be deeply concerned about how things are going to pan out, because something has been released, and I don't know how you put this one back in the box. You know, it's a spiritual force that is meeting a natural element too in a religion that is anti-Israel, anti-Christian, anti-West, and we seem to be wanting to be more politically correct and to address these very, very serious events that are taking place.
Yeah. And Alistair, I think all of us know Jewish people, and there's a huge amounts of fear within the Jewish community. There's a huge amounts of fear of members of the Jewish community putting their head above the parapet at this time with this rising anti-Semitism. And I think now Friday night dinners, for Shabbat dinners, I think the topic of conversation is, do we have a future now in the United Kingdom with all these threats, with this unprecedented rise of Jew hatred? The Jewish people in this country no longer feel safe. So, so where does that lead us?
It's a very, very sad state of affairs that they do feel that way, and quite rightly, because the incidents are getting more and more against Jewish people in the streets. Even in their own communities, when they walk out, there's words spoken against them. I remember seeing a report not so long ago about school life and Jewish school life, and Jewish people in universities are, they need to be so highly prayed for, because they do come under so much threats and words spoken against them. But I saw this in a school report, and they're having to adjust to normality, having security guards walking around with machine guns and armory in the schools. This should never happen with school kids aged 12, 14, 15, whatever. This is normal. They have to have this added security. They have to have check-in, almost like we got to check in when we fly out of the airports to come into their school classes. I think this is such a terrible indictment on our society that we've got this way. And as Len was just saying, why are the police not doing more to stop the hostility on the streets?
Absolutely.
Because the Jewish are a minority people in our nation, but they're a very important people to our nation. They contribute so much to our economy, to our industries and so on. They are a special people. They're God's chosen people. And we need to be praying. Of course we need to be praying, but we need to be praying for favor in our government. We have a government who is pretty pro-Israel generally, but I'm not sure how it is in the police force. There seems to be more of an anti-Jewish move in the police force. It's a generalization maybe, but I see even working in the streets, which I do a lot in London, when you meet up with the police force there, they're almost afraid of going against being the racist card coming against them. And it happens, isn't it? Even this week there's this talk of Islamophobia now is coming on. When we know anti-Semitism is real, this Islamophobia connections being built up. It is so important for us to stand with our Jewish people and make sure that they know that they are loved, they are acknowledged, they are welcome, they're useful in our society, and to challenge our MPs and police force, that these are valued citizens of our nation. We want to see them living a normal life, and not a normal life with a security guard with a machine gun walking around them. They need to live like you and I, most of the time, can just walk out in the streets. We can go down the road to the high street and buy what we want to do without feeling we've got to look over our shoulder. So, we pray for the Jewish people in our church regularly, but we need to see more action towards protecting them.
Absolutely. And our former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, did try and do something and called the police out, and then she was sacked from her position. So, I think there has to be the political will to do something. But Len, if we look at the very disturbing recent report published by the Community Security Trust, that provide protection for the Jewish community, but also they provide annual academic reports on instances, recorded instances of anti-Semitism. So according to my notes here, they effectively say that 2023 was the largest on record, with astonishing 147% increase from the previous year, that was 2022. And that last year's recorded instances were 81% higher than the previous annual record high set in 2021. Share with us your thoughts on these very chilling and disturbing statistics.
Well, who would have thought that would have happened in our country, in the UK? The UK for the Jewish people has been safe, a safe haven. I know many families who moved here after the Second World War and came from Eastern Europe, who settled here because it was a safe place. and now it's not. And unfortunately, to sort of identify the majority of this modern anti-Semitism is coming from the Muslim community. And not every Muslim is anti-Semitic, but there's been a huge rise in Muslim hatred of Jewish people. You know, if you look at these marches that take place in London, you'll see that the huge numbers of people from the Muslim faith, which is very sad, you know, considering that, you know, they're cousins, really, you know, the Arab people and the Jewish people. But, you know, the thing that I'm more concerned of, as well as the expression of anti-Semitism, it's the quietness of the Christians who should be standing up against anti-Semitism. And, you know, if we were really doing our part here, I'm sure those numbers that you quoted would have been much lower. But we tend to be very slow in responding to these things. But, you know, for the Jewish community, it must be a very insecure time. You know, I was reading a statistic that as a result of this present situation, that you know, 80% of Jewish people in the UK are considering, you know, making Aliyah, getting out. That's a huge number. Not that they will do it, but it's on their heart. They're talking about it. Whether they actually do it is another thing. But the fact that they're looking at that to escape, I think. It's a tragedy that we and as I say, I don't want to point the finger again at the police and the government, but they're not doing anything. Well, they talk about things, but they don't do it. You know, it's all talk, and I guess that's the way of politics, isn't it? Really, unfortunately.
Yeah, you upset people by making a difference and doing what's right. And unfortunately, we don't have many conviction politicians. They're few and far between. Alistair, I just wanted to also draw something out of this chilling report published by the Community Security Trust. And that is the volume of anti-Semitic instances that occurred on October the 7th or directly afterwards. According to their figures, they've had 4,103 instances of anti-Jewish hatred that was reported on or after October the 7th. Share with us how those responsible for attacking the British Jewish community are identifying and demonstrating their support for Hamas, knowing that this came directly after the worst mass terrorist attack in Israel's history, the largest number of Jewish people massacred since the Holocaust, and that was well over 85 years ago.
Well, you know, there was a report again, and it came on BBC News, funnily enough, where they were exposing this drive of the IRGC to reach out to young Muslims. I mean, young, I'm talking about sort of 18 to 25-year-olds, and bring them into meetings and basically incite them to find out where the Jewish people were and to actually go out there and threaten them and make them known. So there is this drive going on from outside forces to recruit people inside our nation to...
You mentioned the RGC, just to clear up to our viewers, that's the Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
Exactly, yes, the Revolution Guards. So they have a hand in our nation already. I heard this week that there was a group of 3 terrorists who were arrested and exposed for potential terrorist action. So they've been, the cells are here, and they have an intention, obviously, to disrupt our nation anyway as much as they can. But specifically at this time, since October the 7th, and what's happened since, is to find out where the Jewish communities are and do whatever they can to cause anger, cause fear in these communities. And as Len has just been saying, you know, they are very fearful, rightly so. And we need to make more noise. As Christians, we need to challenge these situations. These people should not be living in threat of destruction and death and so on, and to be considering leaving the nation to go to a nation which is in conflict. Times must be pretty severe for them to be considering it. The chance they won't all do it in any large numbers, but it's happening. And that I really believe as a Christian community we need to stand up and be more vociferous in action. We need to be proactive rather than tolerant. We tend to be very tolerant as a people, but it's time for us to be praying, but also to be standing with our Jewish communities, as a lot of us are doing. When there are these demonstrations in London, you get people coming up from the south, from the north, from the Midlands, and supporting it. And we need to carry on doing that, but also challenge our police force to do the right thing, as Len talked about, do what is righteous, and I think you mentioned it too. But that's sometimes quite a hard thing to do because you get challenged from every direction.
Absolutely. And of course, Len, you have been at so many, I've seen the pictures, so I know that you've been at so many of the pro-Israel rallies, the rallies to bring the hostages home, the rallies for the Jewish community and also Israel as well. Just share with us the kind of current mood amongst those Jewish people attending the vigils that we've seen in London, and I think there's one coming up in Glasgow very soon as well.
You know, it's been an amazing privilege to go and support these rallies that have been organised predominantly from the Jewish community. There has been one organised by the Christian Action Against Anti-Semitism with Tim and Hayley Gutman, which we were involved with. And they're the ones actually that are doing the one in Glasgow on this coming Sunday. So if you live near Glasgow, go and support this rally for Israel, Christian Action Against Anti-Semitism. It's in central Glasgow this coming Sunday at 3 o'clock. We need you to be there. And you know, I was at one on this past Sunday in central London. I've been to about 4 or 5 now. And you know, the Jewish people are just so touched that there are Christians there that are standing with them. And you know, I've had the privilege of getting to know some of the key people in these marches, rallies, and it's been very, very humbling to see that they're so blessed by Christians. But the sad thing is, Simon, that last Sunday, as far as I could see, there were only 2 of us that were Christians out of a crowd of around 2,000. And I you know, Christians, rise up. I feel like shouting it from the housetops. We need to get off our sofas. And you know, these marches we see on Saturdays, people, as Alistair's just said, they come from the north of England every weekend. They come from towns and cities all around the UK to gather in London to express their hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. Why don't we get off our warm seats and off our Sunday afternoon television sets and get out there and stand up with the Jewish people? They need to see more than just a handful. So believers, we've got to be men and women of action, not just of words. And so, and that action is impactful, like you cannot understand. When the Jewish people see Christians standing with them, it provokes them to jealousy.
Yeah.
Amen. That was a great rally call. Thank you very much, Len. And let's have a look now. This excellent CBN News report entitled "Anti-Semitism Continues to Surge. We Can't Run Away from the Darkness."
Nestled in the financial district of Lower Manhattan is the world's largest organization serving Orthodox Jews. If you've ever eaten a Nathan's hot dog or indulged in Hershey's chocolate, you've eaten food certified by the Orthodox Union's Kosher Service, which approves over 1 million products and 70% of America's food labeled as kosher. The organization also supports synagogues, advocates for the disabled, and leads the Jewish Learning Initiative, a college program to engage Jewish students and elevate religious experience.
Free Palestine!
As anti-Israel activists call on the United States to abandon Israel, the Orthodox Union is taking on a new effort, protecting its people.
Rather than providing them with a home on campus, they're providing them with a fortress, a place where they can feel safe and protected from the all too frequent hostility that they experience.
Amid the fallout from October 7th and ensuing war, Rabbi Moshe Hauer has become a leading voice for the Orthodox Jews, from national television to Capitol Hill supporting Jewish college students.
Once upon a time, Jews were not admitted to these campuses. Today, we've come a long way. Jews are admitted to every campus. But today, unlike a short time ago, that admission introduces them to an environment where they experience fear and hostility.
12 of our family members have been affected by the attacks on October 7th. 3 were murdered, 9 were taken hostage.
Most recently, the Orthodox Union and Rabbi Hauer hosted family members of released hostages, highlighting and sharing the pain felt throughout the worldwide Jewish community until each hostage comes home.
Any Jew, any serious Jew, is deeply aware of their history. What we recite every Passover at the Seder, that in each and every generation they stand up against us to destroy us.
Rabbi Hauer says Jews and others saw America as the exception, a land where every identity should feel safe. Now, in a time when hate can feel stronger than hope, the rabbi pulls strength from his faith.
We came to the world in order to be able to bring light. So we're not going to run away from darkness. We can't run away from darkness. We have to double down. We have to know and be confident that ultimately the light will shine.
In New York City, Brody Carter, CBN News.
And who would have thought we would see the level of Jew hatred in the United States, which has always been pretty much a safe haven from Jew hatred. Usually it was just a European disease, but today we see that anti-Semitism has gone global. And we're seeing it's affecting the Jewish communities not only here in Britain, but across Europe, but also in North America as well. And many of them are thinking the same question. Is it time to come home to Israel? Alistair, what is so troubling, I think, and we're talking about the police and the lack of action on behalf of the Metropolitan Police Force in particular, but especially when it comes to the chants that we're hearing every Sunday, that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Why won't our government and police crack down on these chants of genocide? Because if we're talking about the river, that's the River Jordan. If we're talking about the sea, that is the Mediterranean. There's the modern Jewish state of Israel in the smack of this. So they're not talking about wanting to so-called liberate Gaza or liberate Judea and Samaria, which they term the West Bank, but they want the entire Israel, and that can only come at the expense of the Jewish people in essentially another Holocaust.
The problem is that, even when you speak to some of the less hostile of the people who are out there are protesting on the streets and standing with the Palestinian move. They really have no idea, and they don't have any understanding what those words are actually meaning. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And if you talk to them, and some of them are quite nice and easy to talk to, they say, oh yeah, but they don't mean that they want to destroy every Jewish person. They want to live alongside each other in peace. And I say to them, well, go back and have a look at the Palestinian Charter and see what it says in there. And it might change your mindset a little bit. We have a European mindset, we have a Western mindset, which thinks you can pacify people by debating, being tolerant. But it doesn't work, and I was shocked, totally honest, when I saw the picture of Big Ben this last week with the picture of the Palestinian flag and the words from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And I thought this must be one of these fake news items, so I had to research it, but it was real. And I was thinking, now Big Ben is part of the House of Commons, the Parliament buildings, and no one was stopping that. Is that not an incitement? If you go out there and say something pro-Israel, anti-Islamic, anti-Palestinian, you're likely to be, well, even if you just preach the gospel, you're likely to be taken in by the police and stopped from preaching because it incites somebody. But does that not incite Christians? It should do. Does it not stir our hearts up to do something about it and to challenge? How do they have that permission to project that on Big Ben and no one asked the question?
Well, the message is they're saying that they're now in control of Westminster.
Well, yeah.
We're the most powerful force to be reckoned with, and the police can't do anything. Yep. So we're going to continue to incite hatred and violence. And sadly, if this continues, then of course it's going to result in tragedy. There is no other way, and we're now seeing that our members of parliament who are pro-Israel are fearing for their lives as well. So this whole situation has got out of hand because they didn't stop the incitement back in October.
I do think we should be challenging our MPs and saying, how did that happen? Who gave permission for that? Or do they not need permission to do that? Are they allowed to do whatever they like?
I mean, they wouldn't be allowed to do that.
No, exactly. So they'd have had permission from London in some form, or government in some form, or the police in some form. Even when we go out and take people into the streets to hand out tracts and talk to people about Jesus, we have to let the police know, because otherwise they'll shut you down, they'll close you down. And yet these guys can get away with that, and no one even questions it. As Christians, we really need to question, why is this happening in what used to be a Christian nation? I use my words very carefully there, but we need to restore Christian roots and standing with God's people more than ever before, because we are being challenged, for our roots are being challenged, and we need to fight back.
Absolutely. And Len, obviously the famous Welsh singer Charlotte Church has hit the headlines this week. She led a 100-strong rendition of River from the River to the Sea. But when questioned about being anti-Semitic, this was her response. She said, "It was a beautiful, beautiful event, but unfortunately the powers that can't have that, they can't have such power, a symbol of resistance, as what we worked towards on Saturday." She went on to say that clearly, if you know history of it at all, it's not anti-Semitic. Chant calling for the obliteration of Israel, it is not that in any way, shape or form. It's calling for the peaceful coexistence of Israelis and Palestinians. So effectively she's saying it will be, once the state of Israel is destroyed and the Jewish people are completely ethnically cleansed to the Holy Land. Is that what she means?
It's a very dangerous thing that she's doing. You know, she has been deceived, if I don't want to mix my words there. You know, the problem in this whole situation is a gross ignorance and understanding of the whole situation out there. People don't understand, as Alistair's mentioned about the Hamas Charter. You know, if people just had a read of that, it would probably shock them. And dear Charlotte Church, you know, she might have a beautiful voice, but she's been contaminated in her thinking and in her mind. And you know, this ignorance about what this war is all about. Alistair mentioned earlier on about, you know, within a very short time of October 7, the support for Israel disappeared, and it all became anti-Israel, and everyone was against Israel. You know, they were marching within hours of the massacre. You know, you think, what's going on here in people's mindset? I don't understand it. I just can't get to the bottom of it. How can people suddenly rejoice and start, you know, calling for more slaughter, having just witnessed one of the worst slaughters we've seen since the Second World War? And dear Charlotte Church, she needs to get herself sorted. She needs to get some counsel. You know, these are twisted thinking people, and it's dangerous. And she's influential, so and people will just start singing just because she sings it. Oh, isn't that a nice song? You know. Mm-hmm. You know, we're great at singing nice tunes, aren't we? You know, and you know, I grew up in the 60s, and I used to sing some of the songs that grew out of the 60s, and then I got a bit older and started to analyze what I was singing. I thought, well, what am I singing about here? You know, and I think that's the same with her. She's using her talent to influence people, and I'm sad. I'm deeply saddened to hear that. But of course, you know, from my understanding of her, she has very strong left-wing tendencies, and this is all coming out now.
Yeah, and it's tragic that you can be of the progressive left, and you think that Hamas are going to honour your liberal progressive values. No chance. You know, once you have that kind of total Islamic control, yeah, they'll come after you. So there's no immunity just because you side with them for now in this conflict against Israel doesn't mean that's a guarantee to keep you safe. And Alistair, having, you know, thanks to the great ministry that is ICJ UK, that they sponsored me to go out to Israel, I've seen it firsthand the horrors of October the 7th that has probably scarred me quite deeply emotionally, but it's made me want to fight more because I've seen it for myself. And when you see it for yourself, it's an incredibly powerful. But share with us how, for example, the dangerous situation that our nation and our society has gone now that Jew hatred has literally gone mainstream, and we're seeing it's been influenced in popular culture, and now we're seeing these outrageous comments by Charlotte Church that our society and nation need to wake up, because this hatred will consume and destroy a nation, as it will the Jewish people.
As you said earlier, it's not going to end at the Jewish people. You know, the war is bigger than that, and they're on the forefront in Israel fighting against the surrounding people who are wanting to destroy them. It is a worrying, very worrying situation in our nation, and even, you know, as we've talked about Charlotte Church, her comments make you realize that she is deceived and she's very mixed up. But it kind of sums up how our nation is at the moment. Even within the Christian community, there are churches that are totally understanding, standing with Israel, praying for Israel, but there's possibly the majority of churches who are the other side. They look at the pictures and they think, well, there's civilians and targets being they're even talking about an overreaction from Israel. They forget, as we said, 1,200 people were killed and 200 plus hostages taken. They're still over, 150 days since the awful event, and they're still there. 50 plus people, no one knows how they are. They don't have access to Red Cross or any medical supplies. In fact, it's recently been exposed that the medical supplies that were sent in for the ones who were desperate for it hadn't even been opened, hadn't been passed on to the people who needed it. So, you know, let's not forget the reason for this war. And you know, nobody wants to see many people killed. But that's the result of a war against a terrorist organization. And we know that the terrorist organization use people as their shields, human shields. And they love the media attention that comes towards them when Israel's looked to be the bad person in this war. We must remind ourselves it started of a horrific day, October the 7th. I know I did a program with Regan the day after you guys arrived back, and he was almost in a fog because of what had happened, what he'd seen. If people were to go down and see the devastation, and hear the true stories of what actually happened, and I mean, some of the stories I've heard, I wouldn't even repeat because they're so horrendous. It makes me sick just thinking of this.
Exactly. I mean, if the United States had the similar attack on the United States, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of American citizens murdered, the Americans wouldn't respond in the way that Israel's responded. They would just literally carpet bomb Gaza and couldn't care less about the civilians. But Israel cares about the civilians. Actually, they care more about getting the hostages home than winning the war against Hamas in Gaza. That's their number one priority. That's what they care about. And they are having to sacrifice their sons and daughters to fight in this war that they didn't want to fight in. But because of the horrors of October the 7th, they've had no choice, because this poses an existential threat. And of course, no one wants to see war. No one wants to see the devastation caused. But the people of Gaza can only blame Hamas. They can't blame Israel for what's happening. And Len, I mean, this Jew Fest is actually becoming a pandemic, to the extent now that we've also seen that Prince William has got involved. He's waded into this quagmire by publicly stating that he wants to see an end to the fighting in Gaza. He said, as soon as possible, because too many have been killed. And this is Melanie Phillips' response, writing in the Jewish News Syndicate, where she says this one. Says, the death of civilians in war is always a tragedy, but the Prince of Wales didn't say how many was too many in this most just of wars against genocide. Nor did he acknowledge that many Hamas terrorists among the number that he deemed excessive. Share with us how the Prince of Wales need to understand the horrors that took place on October the 7th, and that Israel's fighting a war for her survival posed by this existential threat posed by the genocidal terrorist organisation that is Hamas.
Well, the Prince, unfortunately, is making a huge mistake here, because he's basically saying that Hamas and Israel are on equal footings. He's failing to recognize that Hamas is a terrorist, genocidal organization, and that Israel is a civilized democracy that was attacked and is defending itself. And you know, I think that's a mindset within the media as well, that they're equating as equals, and they're not equals. And we've got to see that the evil of Hamas, and you know, unfortunately it's not the Prince's job to step into politics and make these sort of statements. It does him more damage than good. And again, it shows this huge ignorance that there is within the political world and within the royal family, unfortunately, whom I honour and pray for. You know, and I really do like Prince William. He seems to be a really good guy. But on this point, I would agree with Melanie Phillips that she's got it spot on. He should not be delving in this area and influencing people, because people listen to him and they're influenced by what he says. And our words influence people like nothing else, like Charlotte Church and so many other people who on the media are saying some crazy things about Hamas. So you know, we've got to see what Hamas is. It's evil. It's from the pit. It's devilish. We just heard Benjamin Netanyahu calling it some pretty strong things, and that's it. That's who we're fighting. And I'll tell you this, that you were right to say that that if it was America, they would respond very, very differently. It would also be the case that if it happened in England, we would respond differently. We would not hold ourselves to the same standards that we're expecting to hold Israel to, who hold themselves to a very high standard.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Alistair, share with us your thoughts as well with the chaotic scenes that we saw in Parliament last week as Parliament's opposition parties were able to vote in Parliament. So the Scottish Nationalist Party chose to have a vote on calling for an unconditional ceasefire in Israel. Because of the growing Islamic pressure within the SNP and within the Labour Party, we just saw this absolute fiasco in Parliament, as if the IDF or as if the Israeli government are going to listen to Parliament voting on a motion to call for a ceasefire where their own citizens' lives are not at risk.
Look, I mean, our government looked like a complete fiasco on Friday night with the chaos that was going on there. And it just showed itself in its true light, I guess. But you know, what's happening in our nation is happening in America. There's more and more pressure being put on Israel to have a cessation to the war. And I was so glad to hear Benjamin Netanyahu saying we cannot have a true peace until there's total victory against Hamas. And that is, you know, we must remind people that the war is not against a people group, it's not against a race, it's against a terrorist group who would have been, you know, need to be dealt with wherever they are. So yes, these are difficult times, but we need to wake up and stand for the right things that are going on. And our government, fortunately, needs to back off. What Prince William did, he did out of the best heart, I'm sure. But where's the council? Why are they not getting counsel? You don't talk on these things in the middle of election years or at a time of war. Expressing your opinion, sometimes you just need to back off. Yeah. And allow a nation like Israel under such great threat to make the right decisions. Let's pray. That's what we did this morning in a prayer group. We were praying for the leaders to get it right, to have the spirit of a Caleb and a Joshua or the sons of Issachar who understand the times and know what Israel should do. We need to pray that into the leaders who are making very, very difficult decisions day after day, hour after hour, and not try to push them or coerce them into making decisions that are not right for their nation. So, you know, as Christians, let's be praying right, and let's challenge our nation to back off when they're trying to enforce their opinions.
And also, Len, we have to take into account that God is sovereign in world affairs. After all, history is his story. And what we're seeing really, because of Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, that over 500 people of Gaza have had dreams and visions about Jesus being the Messiah. We're also seeing that, which haven't been shown on our mainstream media, is the demonstrations against Hamas near the Rafah crossing on the border, where the Israeli troops are entering now, saying down, down with Hamas, because the people of Gaza have said enough is enough. Look at the misery that you brought on us. And how can the people of Gaza have a future if Hamas are still in Gaza, and they turn Gaza into a terror state when effectively they could build a Singapore of the Middle East, where they have the best beaches in the Mediterranean. They have so much international aid and money coming in. They could develop that for tourism and businesses, education, and improve the lives of the residents of Gaza, rather than the leaders of Hamas becoming multi-billionaires living in luxury in the United Arab Emirates. Sorry, not in the United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, sorry.
Yeah, well, it's abominable that should happen, that the three richest Palestinians are all living in comfort in Qatar, having stolen money that was given to the Palestinian people. And of course the other money was being invested in a huge tunnel system, which would put the London Underground to shame, because it's been so extensive, and they're finding more and more tunnels all the time. I was just reading yesterday how I think it was Gaza City, they discovered a 2.5 mile tunnel that went right round the city, a new tunnel. You think the place seems to be built on tunnels. Where did all that money go to? And of course now we're seeing aid going in, and what's happening to the aid? Hamas is stealing it. The poor Palestinian people are starving, and of course who's getting the blame for that? Israel. Israel's getting the blame for everything. I think if whatever happens in Gaza, Israel will get the blame. And we know what Hamas do, and the problem is they have got an excellent media team. The way they portray themselves, the way they get their news out, and of course there is this inbuilt sympathy within the major media outlets that will always stand with what they consider the underdog, but in this case it's an evil force. So there's just been abuse of money. That money's been stolen, it's been misused, and the poor Gaza people, the majority, have been led astray by their own people, and of course they're used as human shields. What has Hamas done? One good thing Hamas done for its own people.
Don't think they've done any good thing for the people whatsoever. I mean, they've subjugated them. They've even had, for example, weddings, and Hamas terrorists have got on their motorbikes and actually killed the bride and groom because they didn't want them celebrating, didn't want them having joy. Let's remember what they did in 2007 by throwing the leading members of Fatah, who were part of the PLO, and threw them off buildings when they took over control of Gaza. Look at the way they've implemented extreme interpretation of Sharia law. The attack on Christians and Christian bookshops are living in fear. And anyone who dares say anything against Hamas will find themselves dead. And then we also see that when Israel was telling the residents of Gaza to evacuate Gaza City, they put roadblocks so they can use them as human shields. I mean, this is something that in the West we can only compare the ideology of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood to that of the Nazis. And that's exactly the same Nazi Islamist spirit that we're facing today. And this is what Israel's facing, but that same spirit is coming after us. I mean, only reading this morning, Alistair, that Harriet Harman, leading a politician within the Labour Party, I think she's also a former minister, is now in fear of her life because of the Islamists and the threats against pro-Israel members of parliament and Jewish members of parliament. She's asking for members of parliament to actually work from home now and vote online at home, online, rather than going into the chambers to vote, which is effectively a threat to our entire democracy. So share with us how, if we are to stand with Israel, that means we also have to stand up to this Islamist threat that wants to destroy Israel, wants to destroy the West and replace it with an Islamic caliphate, and how that we are very close to losing our freedom and our democracy in this country if our politicians and our police and our civil society don't have the courage to stand up and fight this. And if they do, maybe it'll be too late.
I think this is one of the things that's really exposed in our nation, as Len has adhered to as well, is the fact that the Palestinian support was already prepared. That's why they're coming in their tens of thousands into London and other major cities. So they are already there with their agenda. There's a plan and a purpose. But the other end, the Christians and the kind of secular world just seems to think, well, you know, we can negotiate, everything will be fine. And it isn't. It is a major battle. It's a spiritual battle, and we need to wake up and smell the coffee, as the saying goes, and of course stand up and challenge the inadequacies in our society that are opening the door to the move of the Islamic. You know, this is not about races. This is not about even religion. It's the truth that there is an agenda, and their agenda is to take over. We know that worldwide, globally, and we need to stand up and fight against it.
Absolutely. And then within 30 seconds, how much do we need people like Alistair and yourself and others, more Dietrich Bonhoeffers, to stand up in this generation of Christians to say we need to stand with Israel, we need to fight Jew hatred, but most of all, we also need to protect our democracy and our liberty in this country? 20 seconds.
Well, you know, every Christian believer has a place of influence, and we can influence our pastors, we can influence our MPs, we can influence the media. We need to be proactive, and the problem is we're not very good at being proactive because it's seen as worldly. I don't know what excuse there is, but we need to start putting on the armor and becoming soldiers. And you know, we're in a war, and we're on the front line. And so rise up, church, and get on with the job.
Amen. So Len, Alistair, thank you so much for being my guests on this week's edition of the Middle East Report. Great job, thank you. We see that Israel is at war, and this is an ideology or a principality that wants to destroy Israel. Sadly, we see that same spirit rising in our nation that's threatening our members of parliament. Our politicians are fearful. Our police are fearful, our civil society is fearful, but we don't need to be. We need to stand up for Israel and the Jewish people at this time. So thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.